Right, let's do a test for the sound before we begin. Although, in all honesty, I kind of want my sound to fail. Based on the current race situation. Either way, it's fine. So, we're gonna get underway. Tough day. Tough day to be a watch-along streamer. And that is why I've joined the race with 63.5 kilometres to go. We're in the lead up to the intermediate sprint. And one of the sprinters who won't be contesting it by the looks of things is Jasper Philipsen, who is chucking bidons to fans at the back of the peloton. Being moved up, admittedly, by a teammate, but doesn't look too intrigued in going for the sprint. Jonas Rickaerts is the rider tasked with moving him through the peloton. Tadej Pogacar equally is at the back of the group, as Lidl-Trek, Jaco Alula and Intermarché Wanty are the three teams getting involved with the sprint in particular. Groupama FDJ trying to move riders up, as well as Arkea B&B Hotels. But the trains are quite large, given the sprint is coming up fairly shortly. Luke Plapp on the front for Jaco Alula in the purple kits this year. And Groupama FDJ, notable by their yellow helmets for leading the team classification after Stage 2, which we will get into at some point. We missed the stream for Stage 2. Well, we missed. I was at work. But through the centre now are coming Israel Premier Tech. Sorry, Philipsen is in the group. I forgot, Van der Poel's the yellow jersey. I'm still in my Stage 1 head space. So Van der Poel's fine. And he's settled in nicely. Philipsen is in the green jersey and is on the wheels of Jaco Alula's train, which is going for Dylan Groenewegen by the looks of things for this sprint. Israel Premier Tech are moving 4 riders to the front. Lidl have 5 in the train for Jonathan Milan. Milan, the 6th rider in that line on the right-hand side of the road that they've picked. Through the centre is Arkea B&B Hotels, who have the whole team there, including white jersey wearer Kevin Vogala, but it's Quinn Simmons at the moment leading the battle of the sprint trains. Lidl-Trek have a very good team for Jonathan Milan, and Milan's moved himself further up that train. He's got a couple of riders sitting on his wheel to make sure that nobody can take the rear wheel of the Italian when he launches his sprint. So it will be Simmons handing over to Schoens, handing over to Consonni, who will lead out his countryman Jonathan Milan. They get the first position into the roundabout. Van der Poel has moved himself up in the yellow jersey. Philipsen has not done the same in green. He is sticking to surfing the trains and surfing his teammate at points. Alpecin trying to get their sprint train together, but at the moment it's Intermarché Wanty on the left-hand side for Biniam Girmay, who are moving themselves up at the right time. Schoens in the centre for Lidl-Trek is doing a good job as well. Intermarché Wanty are down to 2, and Girmay is freelancing from further back, looking to get onto the wheel of the Lidl-Trek train. So despite saying he had a team built around him, Girmay is not using it at the moment for this intermediate sprint, but off they go. Intermarché sending a rider up perhaps to take points off Philipsen and Milan. Here comes Consonni now to the front, leading out Jonathan Milan, who elects to go down the centre, and there's a crash in the peloton. It looked like Jasper Philipsen went down in the green jersey. Could be wrong, but that was a big incident. Jonathan Milan takes the intermediate sprint unmoved. And it is the green jersey, Philipsen down. It looked very bad, and indeed so. His jersey is ripped to shreds. This is not good for Jasper Philipsen. And after so little action, and everybody switching off, nobody crashing, the first moment at which the race speeds up, but he landed nastily, and I'm afraid that seemed to be a shoulder-based injury, perhaps a broken collarbone. I don't want to speculate now, but it looked very bad. One of the riders at the back just making his way back through the convoy and seeing a stricken green jersey on the deck was Mathis Louvel. But Philipsen has a lot of kit removed and they are testing for a collarbone. I think this could be the end of Jasper Philipsen's race. We'll get a replay of how it happened. Philipsen in between his teammate and Bryan Coquard. Is it Coquard or is it his teammate that moves over? It's Coquard who bumps shoulders. It was a real chain reaction incident, that. And Coquard is being berated by one of Philipsen's teammates. It was the guy leading him out, Caden Groves. But I think Bryan Coquard might have some questions to answer because Philipsen is not going to continue in this race, I can guarantee. But Milan wins the sprint, takes 20 points, keeps himself away from all of the carnage behind. Vinny Girmay was the best placed of the intermediate sprint contenders, but he was not high up at all, only taking single figure points. And Philipsen is indeed out, announced by Race Radio now. So, change of plan for Alpecin Deceuninck. What do they do now? Do they go Van der Poel or Groves for the sprint? You'd think Groves would be the choice of sprinter, and it is. It's Rex and it's Coquard that get into a little incident. And the kind of domino effect sends Coquard. But I think, yeah, Coquard moves into Rex. They're going to show it again. Coquard moves into Rex, bump of the shoulders. Coquard somehow holds it up, but in doing so, flies across the road and into Jasper Philipsen's path. And Philipsen is in a sling, and that is the abandonment of the Belgian. Third abandonment of the race then. Filippo Ganna's gone, Stefan Bissegger's gone, and now Jasper Philipsen, arguably the biggest name of those three, out of the race. And that is the way the Tour de France goes. One moment where you switch off or make the wrong move that Bryan Coquard did, and it signifies the end of a rider's race. And again, it's an intermediate sprint. This is not the final sprint by any means. But riders want to be in position, riders want to take points, and literally the first moment where the pace increases, crashes have happened, and Philipsen is the unfortunate casualty. So, where do Alpecin go from here then? I wonder whether they might pick Groves as a backup option in the sprint. But yeah, that's not a good look for Bryan Coquard, and he's going to have to keep himself quite firmly far away from the Alpecin Deceuninck team bus. I don't think he will be the most liked member of the peloton at the end of today. But once again, with an intermediate sprint, more commonly than in a sprint, you actually have lead-out riders like Rex and like Consonni attempting to take points off the other sprinters. And it just means that there's more bodies in there. And despite, some of them taking it less seriously, you get more individuals wanting to get over that line as far ahead as they possibly can. And as a result, you get instances like Coquard bumping into Rex and taking out a fellow sprinter. So, for example, Simone Consonni took 10 points over the line for Lidl-Trek to make sure that Biniam Diomaye and Philipsen didn't get any points, or got fewer points. And by doing so, he's thrown himself, into the mix for a sprint. That's fine in my eyes. But you weigh up that risk, I suppose. And yeah, unfortunate incident caused by Coquard. Will he get a reprimand for it? I guess we'll find out. I'm listening to the race radio, so I will get that through. But yeah, it was just unfortunate. Coquard going for a gap that didn't really exist between Milan and Rex. Bumps shoulders, and then, Philipsen sees his tour finish. I don't even think it was Rex at that point. Or no, it was. Ignore me. But there we are. And, on our feed, the UK feed, David Miller's blaming Coquard because he's got no chance of going for it. Bryan Coquard was third in the points classification last year. He's got every right to go for that intermediate sprint. Anthony Turgis was in the group as well. Somebody like Paul Penaway finished second at that intermediate sprint. Should he not be allowed to go for it because he's not Milan or Merlier or Philipsen? Because he's not in the big three? I think that's a very unfair claim to make. But I think a very fair claim to make is that the breakaway riders, or the wannabe breakaway riders who will go in the breakaway on later stages, are cowards. Somebody needs to get at the front of the race and do it now, because it is incredibly dull to watch. And admittedly, I have done the Bryan Coquard go for the intermediate sprint by watching this. However, I've made a conscious decision to watch the stage, so maybe it's on me more than it's on any rider that should be in the breakaway. And I'm thinking more about the wildcard teams. The Tour de France wants another wildcard. And that's going to be more chaos. And if the wildcard team is not going to throw riders in a breakaway on a stage like this, what is the point, I think? Call me a traditionalist all you want and all that, but it feels like the smaller teams, quote unquote, are now taking themselves a lot more seriously. And because they are doing that, they are kind of losing this traditional perspective of camera time breakaways or publicity breakaways. And actually, if you're a team like Total Energy, who are losing their sponsor to Ineos in the coming years, then surely you go in the breakaway, because you want as much publicity of the jersey and the team as you could possibly get, so that sponsors will want to invest in the team. Now, I'm no expert on cycling finances or the way the peloton works financially, but in my eyes, a publicity breakaway is more important than 7th on a stage or, 15th on GC. Or 5th in the points classification, something like that. Getting somebody in the breakaway on a stage like today, even if it's on their own, it's probably better if they're on their own, because they'll gain suddenly this, sense of they made the stage, at least in my eyes. As this particular town have done a fantastic job with decorating their high street with the French flag. New angle of the crash of Philipsen, and we've got a Movistar rider off in the distance. A couple of riders off in a ditch as well. So maybe that was where Louvel came from. So I wonder whether that was why Louvel was pictured towards the back, overtaking Philipsen. So that was a little subplot of the sprint, if you will. Hello, Finley. I am doing... How am I doing? That's a great question. I mean, the race isn't providing extreme amounts of value right now. So I'm kind of just trying my best to get through this. But I've made a commitment that I'm going to watch every possible stage I can. So there we are. And the big news from today, I'm sure you're watching as well, is Jasper Philipsen's abandonment in the intermediate sprint. Now, the peloton are probably going to go pretty slowly, as Caden Groves is having a debrief on the sprint with Jonas Ricard. Both of them comparing their points of view, I'm sure. Anyway, Finn, how are you doing? So, yeah, now your current points classification. Guillaume will lead the way following Philipsen's abandonment. He'll be on 63 points. Jonathan Milan will move up into second on 51, with Mathieu van der Poel third on 50. And Turgis will move himself 1 point behind Mathieu van der Poel, which is exactly why people like Turgis and Coquard go for it. Penhoe finishing second in that sprint moves himself onto 43 points and is in fifth. So, yeah, I think it's harsh from the UK commentators to say that Bryan Coquard has no right to go for the intermediate sprint, and by doing so is just causing damage to the other riders because, well, Coquard finished third last year in the green jersey and deserved every point that he got, and a lot of the points that he did earn came from the intermediate sprints. So, yeah, it's not fair at all to be brandishing Coquard as he shouldn't be there. But there we are, as the peloton go and take their musettes for the day. Good to hear you're doing well, Finn, but it is a tremendously boring stage. It needs a breakaway, and I've been moaning about a breakaway for a while, and the lack of it today. But yeah, the main point of my breakaway moaning was, what is the point of a wildcard team if they get their tour invite and don't do this? And I was on about Total Energy. You know, they've got no sponsor whatsoever from 2027 onwards because it's moving to Ineos. I think there's more publicity in going in the breakaway, or you do better for your sponsors, in my opinion, if you go in the breakaway than if you finish 7th on a sprint that Emilien Jonier is probably going to do. And they're not like mutually exclusive. So Jonier can finish 7th on the sprint with Thomas Gachinard in the breakaway, you know what I mean? Yeah, it feels a bit like redundant, though, that they want intermediate sprint. Even if they do want intermediate sprint points, if Turgis wants intermediate sprint points, he could still sprint for it from the peloton. Because, let's be honest, he's not winning the intermediate sprint from the group, with the likes of Milan and Guillaume going for it. So, the gaps between him and somebody else is probably 1 point, to say the least. And if you send a rider up the road, then Jonathan Milan will get less points, if anything, which will put you in contention more for the green jersey. So I don't really understand that argument for things. I get the King of the Mountains argument. I wouldn't be surprised as well if Benjamin Thomas just peruses over the top of the climb unchallenged for the point. He won't move into the King of the Mountains jersey because Pogacar still has that for winning the Category 3 climb. And that's the sort of tiebreaker, if you will, between Pogacar and Benjamin Thomas if they're level on points. So it wouldn't mean he goes into the King of the Mountains jersey. So Benjamin Thomas, I get, that's fine. Because Bryan Coquard is an actual sprinter and can mix it. As he proved, I think he mixed it a little bit too much by crashing one of the sprinters out. But he can get in the mix with the other sprinters. Somebody like Turgis, on the other hand, can't do that. And that's why I think Total Energy are missing a trick by not putting somebody in the breakaway today. Again, even if it was like them doing half the stage or a couple of hours up front. Yeah, I don't know. It was a bit like Coquard went for a gap that was not there. And Rex was just an unfortunate passenger. I think it was a bit of a racing incident. Like, I can't really blame either of them. The British commentary heavily blamed Coquard, which I think is unfair. As riders continue to take nature breaks. We've seen a lot of the Swiss national champions jersey at the back of the peloton, Mauro Schmid. He'll have his eye on future stages, I'm sure. Perhaps could have been up there yesterday if he was on better form. But seems to be electing to grow into this race rather than start out of the cannon like Mathieu van der Poel did. But the peloton goes back to a slower pace, a more laid-back pace, probably having a brief chat. Yeah, we're also seeing a lot of European national, the Continental Champs jersey at the back of Tim Merlier, which is fantastic for my predictions, because this is the second straight stage where I've got Tim Merlier as my favourite. I didn't stream yesterday, so Stage 1 and Stage 3 I've got as Tim Merlier wins. Stage 1 was not so successful. But with Philipsen out, I'm feeling a little bit more confident about Stage 2 now. Or Stage 3, should I say. But yeah, the peloton has slowed down. They're doing another replay now of this incident. Rex is sprinting straight just to the side of the centre road markings. Coquard kind of goes for a gap, gets slightly pushed to the side by Milan, but again, Milan's not deviating per se. And it's just an unfortunate incident. I think Groves gave him an earful after the sprint. I think when he watches it back, he won't apologise, but he might regret his actions. Because, yeah, that was a racing incident more than anything else. So it's Luke Durbridge and Jaco Alula in the centre, monitoring the pace with Arkebi and Beotels to their right, Bahrain Victorious to the right of them, and Movistar, who we've actually seen quite a lot of at the front of the race. Enric Mas, a pick in the podcast that we recorded, me and Lucas, last night. Noting that Enric Mas is still on the same time as the rest of the GC competitors, who made it through both the crosswind stage and were at the front for the Stage 2 sprint. And it's a very reduced set of riders now. Only Matteo Jorgensen, Kevin Vauquelin and Enric Mas, other than the big three that finished in the top three yesterday, are within 10 seconds of Mathieu van der Poel's race lead. And again, we'll get onto that slightly later, because it looks like the peloton is in no rush whatsoever. As there's a discussion between Louis Barret and Jonas Ricart about something. Ricart shakes his head and does a kind of get a load of this guy pose. Alpecin are a bit of a weird team. I don't like the way they act on stages like this. I can see why they do it, but like the whole following Mohoric at the start was a bit weird, and they try and kind of bully the peloton a bit, which I think is weird, especially given that you don't have the best sprinter at the race, in my opinion. You have Van der Poel, who is probably the best all-rounder at the race, given Wout van Aert's form as of recent. But discussions still being had between Alpecin's train, and this time they've delegated it to Laurens Rex to discuss with Jonas Ricard. This looks a far more friendly chat. Lots of looking across at each other rather than Barret, who kind of looked straight on. And Ricard was less than impressed. But Bryan Coquard has elected to chat to his French counterpart, Julien Alaphilippe. And I wonder what his view is going to be at the end of the stage. I wonder how he's going to act and how other riders are going to act towards him. Because I think he might be... He might be a little bit under pressure from some of the heads in the peloton. But I think he's got every right to go for the sprint. And he's got every right to go for the gap. It just closed a little bit on him, thanks to Milan moving over. But again, it's not Milan's fault. Milan did not deviate at all. It was just a racing incident. And there's nothing more to be said. So at least there's been one bit of interest, of note in this stage. We'll soon get to the King of the Mountains climb. And then we'll be on to the mass sprint itself. Exactly. Every sprinter has the right to go for any sprint. Totally agree. And every lead-out rider has the right to take points off other riders. I'm just kind of... The reason I clown a bit on Total Energy is because I think they get it tactically wrong by not putting a guy in the breakaway to take points off other riders. But yeah, every rider's got every right to have the front piece of road at all times. It's just some have more talent than others to get to that point. But that doesn't stop Coquard from going for that gap. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to look back on this as a moment that was probably pretty inconsequential in the grand scheme of the Tour. Yes, it finished Jasper Philipsen's day, and probably the chances of Alpecin to go 3 for 3 at the start of the Tour, which has not been done since 1908, I believe. That a team has won the first 3 stages of the Tour. So that chance at history has gone, but in the grand scheme of things, this will be one very small subplot in what is going to be a far more broadly interesting Tour de France. Don't count out Groves is true, and he's a good sprinter on his day, but this is not the terrain for him. He needs more climbs for it to be difficult for the other sprinters, the likes of Milan, the likes of Tim Merlier. And if we go to ads fairly shortly on my stream, I will talk through my predictions for the stage. Thankfully, I didn't put Jasper Philipsen. It was almost as if I knew that there was going to be an incident. Maybe I, DM'd Coquard at the start of this Tour. But Coquard is now chatting to teammate Damien Touze, and if there is one man that I would want backing my corner, it is Damien Touze. I think the only person more qualified to get into a fight with another rider is probably who is the sprinter on Cofidis that became a boxer. I don't remember his name. He was a Belgian. I'm going to Google this now. I've gone too deep into the lore, so I'm going to find out who that was. I don't know how I'm going to find this. It'll be one of the old Cofidis teams from like 2019. Cofidis. Zico Waitons. That was the guy who, quit cycling to become, I want to say a kickboxer. Certainly some form of combat sport. As Victor Campenaerts, just going back to the team car. Victor Campenaerts wearing sunglasses. How dare he? That is not the Victor Campenaerts that I know and love. I wonder whether Visma have had a word with him and said, for the sake of the health of your eyes, please wear sunglasses. Either way, the teams with the predominant flat riders are still monitoring the front of the race. Israel Premier Tech's Chris Nylands on the right-hand side, along with Movistar, who again are positioning themselves very well and have done the exact amount they've needed to for Enric Mas. Admittedly, they've not managed to get any others in the splits, in the important splits. But if you wanted one rider to be at the front of the race at the necessary times, you'd want it to be your general classification leader. So Movistar have done exactly what they've needed to do. And it's been a day for shots of the crowd. I'm sure the Tour de France director is trying his hardest to put all of these together and make them last as long as possible. So on the UK stream right now, I am looking at Astana's team time trial from Paris-Nice because they're talking about the socks that they're wearing. Now, team socks from Paris-Nice talk in the Tour de France probably proves how dull of a stage that this is. So I'm going to get on to talking about my own things. Let's get my predictions up. Because, stage 1 was not a very good result for me. Jonathan Milan didn't make it. Tim Merlier didn't make it into the first split. Arnaud Delis didn't make it into the first split either. Admittedly, all three of them did quite well in the sprint of the second group, but anyone can do well in the sprint of the second group. You need to be at the front when it matters, and they were not. Milan won the sprint from the second group on the road, Delis was second, and Tim Merlier was just nowhere to be seen, which was my main pick. So that is 3 terrible predictions to start off this tour. However, very little change for today's stage. This is my 3 riders to watch today. Jonathan Milan is not my favourite for the stage. However, it's now going to be a battle, I think, between him and Tim Merlier for the stage win, if their teams can position them very well, which they didn't manage to do on stage 1. But Dylan Groenewegen is a man I want to throw into the mix. That is true, if Merlier even tries. Merlier is one of these riders where he just turns up and, like, yeah, I'll give it a go, maybe. Like, if I'm not there, I'm not there, you know. He's got a nonchalant aura about him. But he's going to want to have some revenge, at least today. But Soudal Quick-Step have been poor throughout this race. Either way, why have I picked Dylan Groenewegen in my 3? Is he not washed? I think this is an important sprint for your lead-out riders, because it's slightly more technical than stage 1. Stage 1, we saw pretty much nothing in the way of dramas or turns or important pinch points. I think the final sort of 1,400 metres were straight line, which is totally fine. You can put together a really good lead out in the same way that Alpecin did. Stage 3, though, is a little bit more difficult. There is a final kilometre straight on, no turns as such necessary, but it's very windy, and it's looking like a headwind over the climbs and the bits that were supposed to be crosswind. So it's going to be beneficial, I think, to have an experienced lead out helping you towards the front. Now, Mathieu van der Poel and Jonas Rickard are pretty experienced for Caden Groves, and what would have been Jasper Philipsen had he still been in this race. But Luka Mezgec, for me, is a very experienced lead-out man, and I could have even swapped Dylan Groenewegen for Arnaud Delis and made the same argument about Jasper de Boist. I think Jasper de Boist is one of the most, and has been one of the most underrated lead-out riders, possibly of all time. But again, that's personal opinion. I think this is a classic experienced lead-out guy needed sprint. And Dylan Groenewegen is an experienced sprinter to accompany the experienced lead-out man. Elmar Reinders is going to be in safe hands, is all I'm trying to say in this sprint. Because he's going to have Groenewegen calling the shots, and he's going to have Luka Mezgec there as backup when things perhaps start to go awry. So I think there is no more experienced lead-out than Jaco Alula in terms of lead-out rider and sprinter combined. Caden Groves now beating the Alpecin lead-out, or lead-out turned sprinter now, possibly means that Alpecin are slightly outdone in terms of uncle nature as Jaco Alula. But those are my predictions, my 3 predictions for this particular stage. Now, let's have a chat about stage 2 then. Because I rated it a 7 out of 10 on the podcast, and I think that's probably about right. It was a good stage, but it was a very predictable top 3. Admittedly, the 3 big guns, Mathieu van der Poel first, Tadej Pogačar second, Jonas Vingegaard third on the stage. And Van der Poel won it in quite convincing fashion. Tadej Pogačar managed to get out of the wheel of Van der Poel in the false flat uphill sprint to the line, but could not overtake, and probably would not have been able to overtake, even if the finish line was 200 metres further on. Vingegaard was third, gapped slightly by Pogačar. Some would say lucky to not be on a time gap, but Vingegaard is going to be chuffed, I think, at taking 4 bonus seconds and only losing 2 to his main GC rival Tadej Pogačar. Gregoire in 4th on the stage for Groupama FDJ, with Junior Alaphilippe in 5th. Oscar Onley, good ride from the Brit on Picnic Postinel in 6th place yesterday, with Aurélien Paris-Pontra 7th, Vauquelin 8th, and Velasco in 9th, getting some important points, remember, in the battle for relegation. Oscar Onley getting some important points for Picnic, and Velasco managing to get some points for XDS Astana, with Jenno Bukmoes in 10th, who is a bit under the radar going into this tour, has been in some good form at the Baloise Belgium Tour of recent, and yeah, has proven that I've got ads, which is great, so please tell me what's going on, Finley. Because the moment we've cut to ads, we seem to have had a crash. So I'm going to go to my live reporter, Finley Helmink, on the ground. If we've got a breakaway as well, then that is fantastic. I'm more interested in the breakaway than the fall, to be honest with you. Oh, Wellens. Oh, it's not a breakaway then. Tim Wellens is only doing that for memes. And if there's something I hate more than a no breakaway, it's people pretending to go in the breakaway for giggles. Unless Wellens is going for King of the Mountains. Wellens might be going for King of the Mountains, you know. Because if I get this up, Tim Wellens is in 2nd. Perhaps he's looking to take the jersey off Tadej Pogačar, so Pogačar does less media. and has more time to recover. Because if you're in a leader's jersey, you do a lot more of the interviews after the stage, and you're generally away from where you want to be for longer. So I wonder whether Wellens is going for the King of the Mountains jersey. I'm about to get coverage back. So they're going to show the crash, I assume. I assume they're going to replay the incident. But Wellens is dangling, at least on my screen. I don't know whether this is a replay or not. I think it's a replay. Ah, yes, it is a replay of the crash. And the two riders that went down, one of them was Israel Premier Tech, I think, unless other riders have gone down as well. No, I think it was just those two. So it was the rider from Decathlon Agde was Paris Pontra, who finished in the top 10 yesterday. And the rider from Israel was Alexei Lutsenko, who was also in the front group on yesterday's stage. Both of them looked pretty fine, though. It was just a general entanglement of the bikes. So, yeah, I think both of them will comfortably make their way back into the peloton. Neither of them looked too injured. But Tim Wellens is still away at the front of the race in the Belgian National Champs jersey. A very nice Belgian National Champs jersey, by the way. I now feel vindicated that UAE can actually make a good national champions jersey. All it needed was kickback from Belgium for them to make a good national champions kit. Either way, Tim Wellens up front, 28 seconds, and I've got something to talk about, thankfully. I have got things to fill because Tim Wellens has 35.4 kilometres to go until the finish on my stream. Now 35.3, 35.2. And the kilometres will count down a little bit quicker now that we've got a rider up the road. And Tim Wellens is going to be fresh. I doubt he's going to be allowed to go for it because he's going to be tasked with keeping Tadej Pogačar out of trouble and through safely the stage. But a guy of Tim Wellens' quality should not be given too much of a gap, and the peloton are willing to let this go out to beyond 50 seconds. We'll see whether Tim Wellens might be allowed a little bit of a free element to go for this. Any rider that has won the national championships is going to be in good form entering this Tour de France. Tim Wellens will be no exception. With that UAE Team Emirates helmet, which I'm not going to go into because I'm a hater of generative AI. But the yellow jersey Mathieu van der Poel is nestled in a peloton that is taking no interest in the movements of the Belgian up front, who now has up to a minute 10. So, what is the idea here from UAE Team Emirates? Are they looking to take the King of the Mountains jersey off Pogačar? I don't actually know what the tiebreaker is between the two. Is it GC position or is it something else? I believe it'll be Pogačar in the jersey. We're about to find out because UAE Team Emirates are doing a team radio, which says, Tim, if you win the King of the Mountains, then you will have the jersey. So they believe that's true. They have done the calculation, and if he wins the King of the Mountains, he will be in the Mountains jersey. So this is a move to the KOM. So they have read the rulebook. So Wellens is going for KOM. So that might mean the moment he gets to Category 4, he gives up. Or this is a double bluff from UAE Team Emirates to allow the peloton to give him more time. And if it is a double bluff, then that is a fantastic tactical play from the UAE Team Emirates team car. And it wouldn't be out of the ordinary. I think if I was in the UAE Team Emirates team car, I would say that as well. This could be perhaps the team radio of the Tour de France if he wins. Again, I don't think he will win, but if he does, then people will remember the team radio. (1:30) now for Tim Wellens. This is starting to get ever so slightly out of the hands of the peloton. It's still well and truly within the hands of the peloton, but it's rolling towards the fingers now, rather than being in the palm of the peloton's hands, if you will. But the likes of Louis Barret, the likes of Luc Plapp, Chris Nylands as well for Israel Premier Tech, Raul Garcia Pierna of Arkea B&B Hotels, all of these guys will now have an item to chase up front, and that item is the red, yellow and black of Tim Wellens' Belgian national champions jersey. Another national champions jersey that I wish I couldn't see on the broadcast is George Zimmermann's German national champs jersey for the Intermarché Wanty team. But all the fans that have gathered on Mont Cassel, the 4th category climb, will get 2 groups to watch. First of which will be Tim Wellens, who goes in between the 1 kilometre to go banners to the summit of the climb. And if you told me that there would be a 1-rider breakaway, and that rider would be from UAE Team Emirates, I would have laughed in your face. But Tim Wellens has 1:40 on the peloton and has got 31.5 kilometres to try and hold whatever gap he has over the top of Mont Cassel, if he indeed wants to do that, and more importantly, if the team wants him to do that. Onto the cobbles goes Wellens. Now, the last time there was a King of the Mountains on cobbles, I believe it was the same climb. But we saw Benjamin Thomas and Matteo Verchet have a rather comical incident in which Thomas took out his breakaway counterpart and both of them crashed out of the breakaway. .420 metres to go for Wellens, and the gap is approaching 1:45 now. I don't think the peloton will want to give him much more of a gap at all. As you saw a Belgian flag with On Met la Patate on it. I'm sure that will give him a little bit of extra verve as he goes over the top of the climb. And it is a point now famous for the incident of Benjamin Thomas and Matteo Verchet. Wellens goes over the top of that and stays on his bike. Looks across at the camera, gives an OK signal, and I fear that that is the end. Tim Wellens is now freewheeling. He has... Remco once blamed Jonas Vingegaard for racing with no balls. Tim Wellens has no balls. So, let's say that Wellens has taken the jersey. I assume he has, based on the regulations and the UAE Team Emirates being very sure. At least he'll come away from the stage with something. I'd have liked to have seen how long he could have lasted. Would have been good if he'd done like the OK sign while pumping a massive gear so people didn't know, that people thought that he was waiting. As we've got a crash in the peloton. It's a Cofidis rider that has gone down. According to the race radio, Alpecin Deceuninck is the Cofidis rider that has crashed. We've not seen an angle of it yet. Perhaps it will flick to the camera motorbike at the back of the peloton. Might just be a simple overlap of the wheels. But 30 kilometres of the stage to go for Tim Wellens. He won't be doing those 30 kilometres very quickly compared to the peloton. And that was, right at the back, Alpecin Deceuninck, I believe, who had a little bit of trouble there. 2 Decathlon Agi Désert jerseys at the back of the peloton as well. Bruno Amirai and Callum Scottson. And Tim Wellens is fairly obviously waiting here. Stretching out the legs. And that's a good day at the office for Tim Wellens, who is now in the virtual King of the Mountains classification. So, despite UAE making a national champions jersey good for the first time, they have decided that their Belgian national champion should not be in the Belgian national champions jersey and should actually be in the polka dot jersey. So, even when they make a good national champions kit, their rider doesn't want to be in it. But down the descents the peloton go, and it will stretch out here down this descent. So it will be important to be positioned at the front. So as one Belgian vacates a jersey in the form of Jasper Philipsen, another Belgian will take a jersey, Tim Wellens taking the KOM, and Philipsen ceding the green jersey to, at the moment, Biniam Diomaye, who is in the virtual lead of that classification. So Wellens indeed moves on to 3 points and ahead of Pogacar on count back. So takes the virtual polka dot jersey. Benjamin Thomas on 2 points with Vingegaard on 2 as well. And Kevin Vauquelin, the white jersey, on 1 point in 5th place in the mountains classification. So, Benjamin Thomas, when he took out Matteo Verchet, it's another Cofidis rider involved in a crash. Cofidis are being the aggressors at this Tour de France, and perhaps not in the right way, or the way they would have wanted. Bit weird that Benjamin Thomas didn't go with Tim Wellens, because I'm sure UAE Team Emirates, if they wanted Pogacar out of the jersey, wouldn't have minded ceding it to Benjamin Thomas, but I believe, based on the various rules and regulations, that if Thomas got the point, although Wellens winning it and moving into the King of Mountains jersey is now spooking me, because maybe if Benjamin Thomas did get the point over the top of Montcassel, that he would have moved into the jersey as well, surely, right? Anyway, Cofidis seems to have missed a trick there. Again, it's all about reading the rulebook correctly. UAE Team Emirates seem to have done that to a T. But now it's making me wonder why Benjamin Thomas didn't go for it. Perhaps he has a little bit too bad of a memory of the Montcassel climb. and just decided to race it in the peloton instead. If anything, he would be more trouble racing it in the peloton. But, you know, however he feels. But yeah, I don't know exactly what the countbacks are for the King of the Mountains jersey. Either way, Tim Wellens is in it. Right, let's talk about the general classification. Because these are the other classifications going into the stage. Of course, Tim Wellens now jumps Tadej Pogačar. In the polka dot jersey, Jasper Philipsen, you can now chalk that name off the list for the green jersey. So that's 71 points now that become, well, that still stay 71, but will not be attributed to Jasper Philipsen. Biniam Girmay will move up a position. Mathieu van der Poel will do the same. But Girmay entered today on 54. Mathieu van der Poel entered today on 50. Girmay's opened that gap slightly by going over the intermediate sprint ahead of the yellow jersey wearer. And in the white jersey, Kevin Vauquelin leads the way, 31 seconds ahead of Joe Blackmore, who's had a very good start to his Tour de France for Israel Premier Tech, the debutante at this race from Great Britain. And Matthias Skjelmose of Lidl-Trek is third, 39 seconds down on Vauquelin, who is 10 seconds down on Van der Poel. So you can just add 10 seconds to both of those guys on count back for the yellow jersey position. And here is the yellow jersey. Van der Poel is in the Tour de France lead, 4 seconds ahead of Tadej Pogačar in second for UAE Team Emirates, with Jonas Vingegaard, his GC rival, 2 seconds further behind. And look at these three. Kevin Vauquelin 4th, Matteo Jorgensen 5th, Enric Mas in 6th. All three of those are the only 3 riders now that are within 10 seconds other than the top 3. And Enric Mas has had a fantastic start to his Tour de France. A rider not well known for performing on the flat roads has raced the first 2 stages expertly. And Matteo Jorgensen has done the same, but you kind of expected that from him with his background and being a little more versatile than Enric Mas. But Mas has had a great start to this Tour de France, as has Kevin Vauquelin, who was on the offensive yesterday with Matteo Jorgensen. And both of those riders had something to say about that move before today's stage. Jasper Philipsen came into the day 7th at 31 seconds, with Blackmore, Johannesson and O'Connor all 41 seconds behind. So that is the GC entering the day. Of course, you can chalk Jasper Philipsen off that now. But Matteo Jorgensen, before the stage began, said Tadej Pogačar was pretty good today at the end of the second stage. Getting second on the stage, he was sprinting against Mathieu van der Poel, and it's not a guarantee that he wins on an uphill sprint like that. I think he was at a normal Tadej high level. I would have loved to win the stage, that's for sure, but I wasn't super clear what I should have done when in that breakaway move with Kevin Vauquelin. Our plan was for Wout van Aert, and I'm not sure if he was still there or not, so it's okay. It was a missed opportunity in that regard. Racing is becoming more aggressive, and it's hopefully better for the fans to watch than a controlled sprint stage or mountain trains. I think cycling is getting a bit more dynamic in that regard. I was up at probably 185 BPM and I couldn't hear the radio. It was slightly out of my ear. In the rain at the beginning, the tape came off, and I wasn't sure if Wout was there. In the end, I was supposed to do the lead out for him if he was there, so I didn't want to completely spend myself with Kevin Vauquelin and leave him out to dry, but he was not there. Now, Vauquelin, on the other hand, was interviewed straight after the stage and was pretty irate with Matteo Jorgensen, but didn't really want to say it. Vauquelin said, "I went with Matteo Jorgensen, and I don't know why he didn't want to take pulls with me. I don't understand. I'm still high on adrenaline, so won't say anything stupid, but it's a pity. I was very strong, and if we went as 2 or 3, then maybe we could make it to the finish together. Why they didn't want to, I don't know. It was a good occasion for me and a good race. But I just saw Mike Turnison off the back of the peloton, and Tim Wellens has been caught by the peloton too. So once again, we are a big bunch heading towards Dunkerque. And there is not long left to go, just over 22 kilometres to be precise. Left of the stage. And it's been a stage that has not been raced very quickly at all, just under 40 kilometres an hour average. But that pace will rise as we head towards the finish, and more teams want the stage win. Tadej Pogacar having a joke with Tim Wellens, Niels Pollitt being a bystander, just intrigued in the conversation as Sebastian Grignard looks over his left shoulder and realises that he's got plenty of Lotto riders on his wheel. And one of which hands over a bottle after going to the team car to collect it. But plenty of riders still nestled in this peloton, all of which might want a piece of the day. And for the first time, not at the back of the race, is number 24, who is Tim Merlier, chatting away to an EF colleague. But this is the first time that we don't see him at the back. A nice change for the Soudal Quick-Step man. But with 22.5 kilometres to go, it looks fairly regimented in the peloton. Mathieu van der Poel of Alpecin Deceuninck on the front in the yellow jersey, with Chris Nylands next to him. Brief exchange of words between Nylands, Van der Poel and the Bahrain victorious train. And everybody's in high spirits still. It is the calm before the storm, especially now with the lone breakaway rider of Tim Wellens, who will win the Combativity Award despite being up the road for all of 10 kilometres, if that. Wellens is going to come away with a small cash prize as a result, as well as a small cash prize for winning the King of the Mountains and taking the jersey. So I'm sure that can go towards something in the Wellens household. But Van der Poel on the front, away from his train, and perhaps Alpecin Deceuninck are situated towards the rear of the peloton now, figuring out what they're going to do with the remainder of this train. Are they going to go for Caden Groves? Are they going to elect not to go for a sprint? Are they going to try and sprint for Van der Poel? I think they're not going to try and sprint for Van der Poel, based on the Dutchman's positioning at the moment. The only other Alpecin Deceuninck rider seemingly towards the front or middle of the peloton was Sylvain Dellier, and his job for the day was not necessary at all, really. He was designed to pull back the breakaway, but with no breakaway, he's been unemployed, really, for the day. Sure, that's a nice surprise for him as Tish Benoot moves up on the left-hand side with Jonas Vingegaard in the wheel and Matteo Jorgensen there as well. Slight concern maybe about crosswinds, just making sure that their GC rider is towards the front, and it's the first really we've seen a Visma Lease bike at the front of this race. Remco Evenepoel sat nicely on the wheel of Pascal Eenkhoorn. And Tim Merlier moves himself further up the peloton and sits fourth wheel in the train. So both Remco Evenepoel and Tim Merlier towards the front for Soudal Quick-Step, keeping themselves at the front when it matters. Let's go through the rest of the quotes for the stage then quickly. because I think there are no more ad breaks on my feed. So we'll fly through these, and then I will take you through the final sprint and have a brief debrief of the results at the end of the stage. We'll start with João Almeida, who, in a long-form interview with Eurosport, said, "I've come to this year with a better approach. Last year I was a bit sick before, so I didn't start with the right feeling. I think this year is a better start, so hopefully I can be better. I really believe Tadej Pogačar is the strongest guy, but on the same hand, the Dauphiné was the first race after Jonas Vingegaard had his crash in Paris-Nice." He went on to say that the Tour is one level higher than the Dauphiné and will be that in the race this year because of that rhythm of competition, so we can still expect a really strong Jonas, but for me, Tadej is still the favourite. I'm not saying that because I'm his teammate, I'm saying that is because what I feel. I come here not as leader, I want to do my best for Tadej. I can do a really good job. I can make a difference on this team, and I'm excited to do this job and to do my best. This season I have had good success in 1 week races. The next goal for my career though is having a Grand Tour in my pocket. It's a super hard task. With Tadej in the Tour, it's hard to have a leader role because he is super strong and better than I am. Maybe I need to pick another Grand Tour as a result, but it's a pleasure to be here and I am really excited to do this tour. So perhaps Almeida bullish about a Giro d'Italia attempt next year or the year after even. Could be an idea for him. Somebody else who has won a Tour, a Grand Tour and a Tour de France, Geraint Thomas, who at the end of yesterday's stage said it was a really tough stage. You had the rain at the start, which added a bit of stress, but luckily it stopped pretty soon after. We got dry roads and the wind wasn't quite as much as we expected either, so that was quite nice. It made it a little less stressful at the midway point. From 50 to 70 kilometres to go, there was fighting and stressing, but that's normal, isn't it? It's the Tour. But we rode well. We were always where we wanted to be going into the climbs. We were in decent position for the last 3 climbs. Axel Laurence was there, but his legs sort of went on the second climb. It was the exact same with me. I was hanging in there, but I felt every one of my 39 years. They aren't quite my forte anymore. I was so close to staying in there, but I got spat out maybe 100 metres from the top. I knew Carlos Rodriguez was not far behind, so I waited for him and tried to help as much as I could for Carlos to limit his losses. So we'll go through quotes from Jasper Philipsen, Mathieu van der Poel and Christian Niemann before the finish, which is 18.5 kilometres away. So I've kind of got to get through them pretty quickly at this point. But with no breakaway and the peloton probably continuing to go at this pace, as one of the Intermarché riders heads out of the back of the peloton with a rear wheel puncture by the looks of things. Forward comes the Intermarché 1T team car as a result to help out their rider. And the cameras are on Jonathan Milan, who needs a good sprint today to resurrect his green jersey hopes. And was irate yesterday at Biniam-Girmay. Did apologise for his actions. But full of adrenaline is the big man Jonathan Milan, and it was Vito Bright with the rear wheel puncture. The Intermarché jersey that was out the back. That was a good spot from the helicopter cam from me. Not to blow my own trumpet or anything. So, with that lull happening and Vito Bright surely making his way back to the peloton, he will be a key lead-out rider for not Jasper Philipsen, Biniam-Girmay. A key rider for Jasper Philipsen would have been Mathieu van der Poel, who obviously took the win yesterday. And he said at the end of yesterday's stage, it was super difficult. The final was actually harder than I thought. I was really motivated. It's been 4 years since I won my first stage at the Tour de France, so it was about time I finally won a second one. Of course, people put me as favourite, but if you see which riders were in front on the climbs, I think I did a really good job today to be there. They predicted a headwind on the climbs, so I thought Jasper Philipsen would have a chance at the stage, but the climbs were harder than I expected. It was a really hard pace as well. You saw on the second to last climb, there were already maybe 8 guys on the top, so it was a really hard and nervous day again. The first 2 days were a dream for the team. Everything else that comes now is a bonus. It wasn't easy at all. It's also the second time that I'm rewarded with the yellow jersey immediately, so it was well worth the wait for a stage win. I think I did a good job. The team told me to study the last 500 metres, so I watched it a few times in the team bus beforehand. He went on to say that they had a video of the finish line, and I knew what I wanted to do if it came down to a sprint, but if you see who the guys in second and third were today, that says enough about how hard the stage was. I didn't dare to raise my hands before the finish line like Peter Sagan did at the same stage finish, but it's an incredible moment again. Let's hope I can wear the yellow jersey for a few days, maybe until the time trial. There it will be very difficult to keep it, but just winning a stage again was the objective for me, and I'm very happy to have achieved it. I'm really happy that I was up there with Tadej Pogacar and Jonas Vingegaard. I also didn't screw it at the end, because you never know what could happen. At the first stage of the Dauphiné, they both beat me in a sprint, so I wasn't sure that I would win, and I'm really happy that I have won. I did everything perfectly, and it has been a while since the last one. So Van der Poel took his second win at a Tour de France, which is pretty crazy to say, I guess, in terms of a rider of his quality, but he's never really brought that quality to the Tour de France. He's kind of peaked for the classics, and as a result, he's not brought the best Van der Poel possible to the Tour de France. But based on yesterday's stage, it looks like we're seeing a prime Van der Poel like we saw when he took his last stage win in 2021 at the top of Mur de Bretagne. So a 4-year gap between stage wins, but as he said, it was well worth the wait. His teammate, now out of the race, Jasper Philipsen, said that Mathieu van der Poel was incredibly strong, and I felt a bit less from yesterday. It was a super hard day in the end, but I'm so glad Mathieu could take the win on stage 2. It's the second one in a row for our team. I think everybody got a lot of confidence from yesterday. We took control, the guys worked really hard, and it wasn't easy at all. With a strong leader like Mathieu, it makes the work for the guys much easier, and he was incredible today. Tomorrow is going to be a flat day with a bunch sprint, probably. The day after, it will be another day for him. I think he takes the yellow jersey as well. Indeed he did. So I am really happy that we could keep it in the team, and it's a really nice day for us again. It's not a really nice day for Jasper Philipsen, who is now out of this race, getting involved in a collision with Laurens Rex and Bryan Coquard at the intermediate sprint, and likely having a collarbone injury because he was in a sling, was the now green jersey, who will cede that at the end of the stage to whoever finishes highest in the green jersey classification. At the moment, it looks like it's going to be Biniam Girmay, but might not be come the end of the stage, depending on what the likes of Jonathan Milan have to say. One more person who had a brief bit to say was Grisha Nierman at the end of stage 2, and he said, I think today UAE Team Emirates did really well. They were still there with I think 4 guys in the final, and that was impressive. On a day like yesterday, I believe that our team is stronger than UAE, but we're also the 2 best teams in the Tour with the 2 best riders at the race. That is not a hot take from Grisha Nierman. But what is getting hotter is the pace in the peloton. The yellow jersey of Mathieu van der Poel is on the left-hand side of the road, 3rd wheel in the Alpecin Deceuninck train. But Grisha Nierman's Visma riders have got 5 names towards the front. And I don't think any of them... Oh no, ignore me. Jonas Vingegaard is sat 2nd wheel in the red helmet. I was looking for the red helmet, but you could only see white. I think it was the camera angle. But Girmay sat 2nd wheel. A couple of riders going out of the back of the peloton. One of them, I think, has a mechanical problem. The other one is an Arkea jersey taking a nature break, which is a bold decision with 13.7 kilometres of the day remaining. But Tim Merlier is nestled in the peloton nicely in a Soudal Quick-Step train which is headed by Pascal Eenkhoorn. Remco Evenepoel is sat second wheel, followed by Mattia Cataneo, then Bert van Leerberger, and then Tim Merlier. So that might just be their train for the sprint finish. Maybe Remco gets involved setting up his teammate to be in best possible position for the sprint. Tim Merlier not brilliantly positioned at the end of stage 1, but is going to be positioned well by the looks of things. He's certainly towards the front of a reduced peloton now, as the day comes towards a close. And I think with more riders having more energy, not having to chase down a breakaway and going at around 35 to 40 kilometers an hour throughout the day, there is going to be more chaos in the sprint. We've not had crosswinds, teams haven't been pushing it, not even the threat of crosswinds in which teams just fight with each other purely for position and not to force echelons. So, the peloton will be more chaotic, I think, ahead of the stage finish into Dunkerque, as we look at Nils Pollitt on the front for UAE Team Emirates, keeping Pogacar out of trouble. He's got the future King of the Mountains jersey wearer, Tim Wellens, on his wheel, who took the only point of the day over Montcassel. And the peloton are all bunched together once more. It is very calm still, with 12.2 kilometres remaining in the day. But it will get more frenetic. That is for sure. Israel Premier Tech in the centre. 5 riders in their train for Pascal Ackermann or Jake Stewart. Another chance to see which of those riders will be the designated sprinter for that team. Because of the crosswinds on stage 1, we didn't see those teams that have brought multiple sprinters to the race, like Israel, pick which one they prefer. You'd think it would be Ackermann. Even though perhaps Stewart might be considered the faster rider, Ackermann is the bigger name and perhaps commands more respect in the team as a result, based on previous results in his career. But DSM... I've said DSM again. I am going to get out of that eventually. Picnic Postinel have 2 sprinters as well. The murmurings were that Pavel Bittner is their preferred option, with Tobias Lund Andersen a capable second option if Bittner gets involved in any troubles. But once again, we didn't get to see that on stage 1. So have plans changed, or are they going to stick to the original idea? That was an important roundabout, and a roundabout that Alpecin Deceuninck have lost. Going round on the left-hand side when you wanted to be on the right. The winners of that are the likes of Lidl-Trek, Intermarché, Wanty, UAE Team Emirates as well. So it's going to have to be a big turn from the now reduced Alpecin train. Intermarché Wanty, however, have devoted their whole team to Biniam Girmay and are starting to form a line on the right-hand side of the road. Vito Bright working his way up after his rear wheel mechanical and slots himself into the train. And it's a very big train, a train of 6 riders to be precise. No Louis Meintjes here, so no GC hopeful for Intermarché Wanty. They might be looking at stages in the future with Louis Barret and George Zimmermann, but right now all of their resources will be allocated to the Eritrean sprinter Biniam Girmay, who is currently the virtual green jersey And we're having an increase in pace, and with that will come an increase in tension in the peloton going underneath the 10-kilometre to go banner, and the increase in pace is being forced by Remco Evenepoel at the front of the peloton for Soudal Quick-Step. So Remco is forcing the tempo now. He will hand over to Mattia Cataneo, who will then give Bert van Lerberger the keys to position Tim Merlier. Those two have got a great relationship, Van Lerberger and Merlier, and have proved it, pretty much sweeping anything in front of them that is a sprint so far this season. Merlier has been off the charts, 2 stage wins at the Baloise Belgium Tour, remember, wins at the Brussels Classic and Shell de Price, both of the first 2 stages at Paris-Nice, and 2 stages at the UAE Tour, as well as 2 more at the Alula Tour. He's basically won pretty much every sprint he's participated in, bar a couple, most notably at Gent-Wevelgem, where he finished in 2nd place behind Mads Pedersen. But Merlier has been prolific as anything this season. And if he gets the right lead out, he might just be unstoppable. One man that can definitely stop him, though, given the right conditions, is Jonathan Milan. As Remco Evenepoel is barking orders to Mattia Cataneo to get across to the right-hand side of the road. Taking the role of road captain is the Olympic champion. And Cataneo controlling the pace with 8.3 remaining in the stage, wanting to keep Remco Evenepoel out of trouble. And that means that Van Lerberger and Tim Merlier have said, I don't fancy that, to be honest with you. I'd rather be a little bit further back, protected from the wind a bit more. It might mean you were more at risk of a crash and being caught up in one, but that is the decision they're going for. And Merlier and Van Lerberger like to leave it late, and so do the Alpecin train, who are going to be a little bit inhibited by the withdrawal of Jasper Philipsen. 7.7 to go, and the tempo is definitely increasing. The peloton getting strung out more and more as we get closer to the finish line in Dunkerque. Now is the time to work out who the Israel Premier Tech sprinter is. Jake Stewart's nicely positioned in that train, so it might be Stewart that they're going for today. Ackermann didn't look too great on stage 1. So it could be Jake Stewart's opportunity to prove himself in a sprint. Very good sprinter and one of the riders that has beaten Jonathan Milan for raw pace this season so far. Again, Merlier and Milan, the 2 main names for the stage, barring Jasper Philipsen, who is now, of course, out of the race. Milan has been successful this season as well, winning at the UAE Tour, 2 stages there, 2 stages at Tirreno Adriatico, 1 stage at the Criterium du Dauphiné as well. So is very good and pushes watts that probably the rest of the peloton can't. It's down to his Lidl-Trek team to position him, however, and they've got some very good engines to do that. Tom Schoynes, Thibaut Nace, Jasper Stuyven, Edward Toynes, Simone Consoni, his lead-out man. But they have been washed away slightly. Schoynes was controlling the front, and he still sits in a good position, but it is not right at the front in the same way that Soudal Quick-Step were, and Astana are now on the right-hand side. They've got a 4-man train headed by Evgeny Fedorov, as Israel Premier Tech gain another rider in their train. Ackermann trying to sit on the wheel of Jake Stewart, so they could be going for Ackermann instead. But Stewart's there if it gets very messy. And it is Nylands on the front for Israel Premier Tech, who makes sure he gets in front of the XDS Astana lead out, putting them in a commanding position. as we have just over 5 kilometers to go until the peloton arrives in Dunkerque. And from now onwards, from when they go under the 5 kilometers to go banner, which is very shortly, the GC contenders will be safe. A little bit of wiggling around the road, led by the Quick-Step team. And now, officially, the GC contenders are safe. They are past the sprint zone. Any crash, people will be given the same time as the group that they were in. We saw that with Ben O'Connor's incident with Marijn van den Berg on stage 1. But forward now come Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. The first we've seen of them towards the front. And Tim Merlier emerges again with Bert van Lerberger. He's picked to the wheel of Remco Evenepoel. And another new team, Picnic Postinol. We've seen them at the intermediate sprint. They've come towards the front once more. Right-hand side of the road. Will it be Bittner or Lund Andersen for them? Lund Andersen being reported with a move away. Bittner staying at the team for the foreseeable future. So they may have had their decision made for them. But they've been washed out once more by XDS Astana. And this time, Lotto, who come to the front. It's important not to be at the front too early. With very little in the way of road furniture ahead of the sprint. As there's 3.8 to go now. Tom Schroens moves up on the left-hand side in the Latvian national champions jersey of Lidl-Trek. And Lotto move a couple more riders towards the front. Jared Drisners is there. Arnaud Delis at third wheel. Jasper de Boist will move up as time goes on, I'm sure of that. And Groupama FDJ have 3 riders on the left-hand side as well. Bahrain victorious through the centre. Their sprinter has been dislodged ever so slightly, and their sprint train is all over the road. Sprint train's fighting for position, and the team that are best together at the moment is Lotto, with Arnaud Delis. Tobias Lund Andersen looks to be Picnic Postinel's sprinter, and we go to the rear of the peloton, and the narrowing has caused a crash. Can't see who's down at the moment, but everybody's slowing up. And there was a rider on the floor there. Hopefully they're all right. Either way, they will be given the same time as the leaders because they were within the 5 kilometre sprint zone. And here's a replay of what went on. Ooh, touch of wheels, and it's Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe that have 2 riders go down. And that was at a very high pace as well. Remco Evenepoel has an arm on his back, so he has been involved in the incident. Vlasov's waiting up. Primoz Roglic looked to be getting back on his bike there. Didn't look too cut up. But there was an incident there, and riders are on the deck, and that looks to be the end of the tour for one of the Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe guys. But the race will continue mercilessly at the front. It's STS Astana against Israel Premier Tech. It's the Kazakhs against Israel. And Kazakhstan might be winning it on the left-hand side of the road, going under 2 kilometres to go. Remco Evenepoel and Primoz Roglic having a debrief of the crash. Roglic actually might have kept it up. Evenepoel looks a little bit worse for wear. A little bit of road rash on the left-hand side. But back to the front of the race, and it's XDS Astana controlling left-hand side. Yevgeny Fedorov moves up, and that's an extra man for them. Lidl-Trek have slotted themselves onto the wheel of the Kazakh outfit. Down the inside, round the final corner, I believe, with 1.6 kilometres to go, come Groupama FDJ, who are going to be sprinting for Paul Penouet. He was second at the intermediate sprint, a statement of intent perhaps from the Frenchman, with 1.4 kilometres to go now, and Soudal Quick-Step are at the front. Picnic Postinel still have 3 riders in the group. Lidl-Trek moving up left-hand side now. They've got 3 riders. Simone Consoni will be leading out Jonathan Milan. Milan, the winner of the intermediate sprint. And his counterpart, Tim Merlier, is nowhere to be seen in the European Champions jersey. He's got Bert van Lerberger to lead him out. They do like to arrive late towards the finish line, but they are leaving it especially late in this case. Jaco Alula in the purple jersey is also trying to move up, but here comes Merlier. He's not got Bert van Lerberger for company, but he's doing it himself, battling for the wheel of Jonathan Milan with Pascal Ackermann. So it's Merlier and Ackermann battling for Milan's wheel as Lotto move up on the right-hand side, but Arnaud Delis is nowhere to be seen, and Picnic Postinel take advantage of that, moving up on the left for Pavel Bittner. And Picnic Postinel are in control of the sprint at the moment. They are going to wait to launch. Jonathan Milan, though, sat third wheel, and there's a big crash left-hand side of the road. Riders go down. Milan through the centre. Picnic Postinel left-hand side, but Milan goes over the top. Merlier arriving late. Merlier against Milan. Merlier through the centre, who will just about get there and win the stage in the European Champions jersey. Tim Merlier wins stage 3 of the Tour de France in a chaotic day that perhaps will be remembered for a couple of crashes late on. Everybody will be given the same time as Tim Merlier because we were within 5 kilometres to go. But that was a big sprint from the Belgian who gets around Jonathan Milan. Milan pushed incredible watts, and it was a massive incident. One of the Total Energy riders went thundering into the barriers on the side of the road. Hopefully he's alright. But Merlier comes out of Milan's wheel, gets around the Italian, and it's on the bike throw. Milan has a longer sprint, and actually Milan might have just got there. He threw the bike early, but Merlier sticks the arm up, and I think they've given the win to Merlier. Coquard went down very hard as well, I think, if that is the Cofidis jersey that I am looking at. Elsewhere, Arnaud Delis also went down in the crash, but he was nowhere to be seen for the sprint. Merlier launched off the back of the Picnic Postinel lead-out. Serdan Vereshkol was arriving on the right-hand side with Phil Bauhaus as well, tucked in nicely. He's always up there or thereabouts on the sprints, a good positioner for Bahrain Victorious. And I think he gets third on the stage with Valenciennes fourth. We'll check up on the results at the end of the day. Groves was the elected sprinter for Alpecin Deceuninck, finishing in the top 10, but not troubling the front. And it is Merlier by about a tyre's length ahead of Jonathan Milan, Phil Bauhaus third, Serdan Vereshkol fourth. And a good result for Picnic Postinel, who once again pick up more points in their battle to avoid relegation with Pavel Bittner. And actually Milan went ever so slightly early. Merlier was slightly late with his bike throw, but did enough in the sprint itself to make it to the line in first. And through come the rest of the peloton. Jonas Vingegaard is actually in that second group. Doesn't look like he's got any damage from any sort of crash. So Vingegaard looks okay. We're looking for riders who are not looking too brilliant. One of those is from Groupama FDJ. And that is quite clearly a broken bike. I think that's Paul Penaway, who is just going to walk over the line for Groupama FDJ. Remco Evenepoel might be important to assess his left-hand side. And XDS Astana have waited up as well, so their whole team could not deliver any sort of result today, but somebody who could was Tim Merlier. The European champion takes his first stage at the Tour de France, I believe. Is that Merlier's first win at the Tour? Could be. But this is a sight. Groupama FDJ's rider. I'm still trying to work out who that is. I do think it's Penaway. Sauntering across the line with his bike in hand. Will he be jumped on the line by Cofidis' Benjamin Thomas? Yes, he will. But the winner of the stage is Tim Merlier. Let's have a look at the results. This is going to be spoilers for anybody. Stage 3, Tim Merlier wins the stage ahead of Jonathan Milan in second, Phil Bauhaus third, Søren Valenciennes in fourth for Uno Expability. Another good result for him, and perhaps might be going for green jersey because the points are falling in his favour. Pavel Bittner, P5, Binio Diomaye 6th. I'm not sure what that does for his green jersey hopes. Kane Groves in 7th, Alpecin Deceuninck's new sprinter, now that Jasper Philipsen has crashed out of the race, with Danny Van Poppel in 8th, Pascal Ackermann 9th, and Amaury Capio of Arkea B&B Hotels rounding out the top 10, Dainese 11th for Tudor, Lund Andersen 12th, Tronchon 13th, Dylan Groenewegen, my outsider pick for the stage, 14th, not a great result from him, Stewart 15th, and Damien Touz in 16th. So it wasn't Turgis, the Total Energy rider, that cannoned into the barriers at pretty high speed. But Milan loses it on the bike throw, and Tim Merlier wins it on the bike throw. That was a pretty good sprint. Not a fascinating stage by any means overall, but I certainly enjoyed the sprint at the end. And it is going to be one that may linger on with Bryan Coquard under investigation, I'm sure, by probably most of the Alpecin Deceuninck team for what he did at the intermediate sprint. However, I don't think much will come of that. However, keep an eye on Remco Evenepoel and other riders that were involved in that incident at the narrowing. Inside the final 5 kilometres, they will all be fine for time, but how will they look in terms of potential injuries? Of course, you're wishing the best for all of them, but there may be instances where riders may have a little bit of road rash tonight, not sleep too well ahead of stage 4. Stage 4 is another hill stage into Rouen, another chance perhaps for Mathieu van der Poel to increase his lead in the King of the Mountains jersey, in the yellow jersey, going from Amiens to Rouen, and lots of climbs in the final, and it is going to be a very knobbly stage. My pick for that day, based on what I did at the Tour de France preview podcast that I did with Lucas. Let me remind myself of who I picked. I had Tadej Pogačar winning this, and it does look a little more selective than stage 2. So I will see you all there for that. A interesting stage certainly coming up on stage 4. Today was interesting, but for different reasons. And I think I will call the stream there. It has been a fun hour and a half. We've had no breakaway, but we have had vibes. And that is the main thing. Will I raid anyone? Probably not, because I always forget to do it. But yeah, hope you've all enjoyed being here. Whether you've been lurking or chatting like me and Finn have throughout the stage. It's certainly been fun in my regard. And I'll be back tomorrow getting all of the juicy quotes and various bits and pieces. I'm sure Alpecin Deceuninck representatives will have a lot to say. Bryan Coquard will want to argue his side as well. And we will get quotes, I'm sure, from Tim Merlier, the stage winner. And the yellow jersey, Mathieu van der Poel, who will hold it for another day. But for now, I will see you ahead of the next stream. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy yourselves.